Hello, everyone. I am Patrick Cawley with Keystone Elder Law. This is Keynotes, a series of conversations about later in life planning. Normally, when I do conversations about planning for later in life, it has to do with legal or financial plans, both to preserve assets so that you'll have something to live on, your family will have something to live on in the future, but also so that long-term care will be paid for. There is a reason for this. I see crisis cases where there's not only financial difficulty, but there's a lot of emotions that go along with it. A lot of people don't consider funeral planning to be a part of this holistic planning for later in life. There are both technical, legal, and financial aspects where it can benefit your family, but of course, there's also a range of emotional considerations to take into consideration and to give the gift to your family of having that all sorted out. I am thrilled today to be joined by Jill Lazar of Hoffman Funeral Home and Crematory in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Jill knows a lot about these issues and guides people through these decisions all the time. So I'm thrilled to have her here on Keynotes. Jill, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me.
You know, as I go through funeral planning as part of holistic planning for a person's later in life years, some people might not think about funerals as the same way they think about having a power of attorney or a trust or a will. But let's talk first about why people should think about a funeral in general. What role does a funeral play as you talk to families? What role do you think it plays in the whole planning for the future of the family?
I think it's a very important part of the future plans for the family, Patrick. We as funeral directors see the funeral as the beginning of the grief process. And so many people don't think of it that way until they have a crisis on their hands. Putting a funeral together means that we're planning something for the people that are going to survive you. Are we being kind to the people that we're leaving behind? Remember, the day that you're gone, they're going to be left with a hole in their heart and a space in their life. And what we want to do is build something that's important for them to start the grief process and start that publicly. We often don't think about friends. We often think about the family, but it's the friends and the neighbors that are sometimes forgotten. And that public service gives everybody who's cared about you that opportunity to start that process.
Those are such important points as far as the first step in the grief process, something that maybe people might say, well, I don't need that all, and they overlook it, but then they come to find out how having some sort of ceremony that you know, this is not a new concept. It's always been part of recognizing the loss, validating the life, and celebrating the life that was lived. But when it comes to your role in the process and guiding families through it, I mean, there's a lot of details that I think people don't think about. So it's not just a matter of, you know, throwing up a Facebook post and saying we're all getting together. There's an awful lot more to it. So guide me through what you talk to families about, the kind of information you gather, the kind of things that they don't think about.
When I get together with a family to work on pre-arrangements, on funeral plans ahead of time, the things that I focus on are all the pieces that I'm going to need to build an obituary, as well as fill out a death certificate. And although these are easy questions for the person to answer, they're not always easy for the survivors. Things like name, address, social security number all seem easy, but do your children know your social security number? Do your survivors know what your mother's maiden name is? That's all information that I would need to fill out a death certificate. Beyond that, beyond all those statistical details, I like to get all of the information that you want people to remember you by. So when the obituary is written, it represents the life that you lived. It represents the things that you want people to know about you. Once we have those pieces in place, I start to build the services. I start to talk to the family, start to talk to the individual about what might be important for their survivors.
You know, this sounds, at least process-wise, a lot like the conversations that I have with clients where they they want to jump right into a certain type of planning, almost like you said, let's plan the service. Well, there's an awful lot we need to know before you get to that point. And I think if your experience is anything like mine, you have these conversations with families and you see the look of recognition on their face that there were details they weren't even thinking about. So there's a lot of value in that. So I think you're making the case too for planning ahead, pre-planning, rather than allowing your family while going through grief to have to do all kinds of detailed planning in the course of maybe a day or two after the death of their loved one.
Oh, absolutely. I have never had a family tell me they were disappointed that their loved one had planned ahead and prearranged everything. When somebody plans ahead, we know that we are doing exactly what they wanted, and it often alleviates the stress that the family is feeling. It always sounds like easy to plan a party, easy to plan a memorial service. But what people forget is that when somebody dies, we are often left with a big hole in our heart. We're often left grieving. And that is not the circumstances under which we want to plan any type of gathering. To have this laid out ahead of time allows the survivors to begin to grieve, to welcome guests that may be out of town, to start to tie up those loose ends that are so necessary to tie up at the time of a death that people just don't understand happen if you haven't been through this before.
All very good points. And, I mentioned right at the outset that there are, both emotional and legal and financial reasons to plan ahead. Just to touch on some of the legal and financial reasons, I know that some of my clients have raved about how well you understood the process, and not to mention your sort of bedside manner, the way that you spoke with them, went out to their homes to speak with them and so forth. But a lot of this comes up, at least with my clients, in the context of planning for maybe long-term care, whether for themselves or for a loved one. For most people in central Pennsylvania, having $11,000 a month to write to a nursing home for the care that's required is just not going to work for very long. And so Medicaid becomes the way that most people pay for skilled nursing care, whether it's because of dementia or Parkinson's or just a long-term physical rehabilitation. And so as part of Medicaid, we have to follow strict financial guidelines, get the person down to a relatively low number of assets. But part of the way to do that while keeping money in the family is planning what they need anyway, which is their funeral planning. And of course, Medicaid allows a certain amount of money to be set aside for that. So talk a little bit about your experience with pre-planning for people who are also planning on Medicaid paying for long-term care.
That's a great topic, Patrick. I work with numerous families that are working with a loved one that has had to be placed in long-term care. And exactly what you're saying has happened. They've begun the spend down process, the process of the funds and the assets going away and going to pay for nursing care. But we are allowed to put monies aside for the funeral expenses. And the nice thing here in Pennsylvania is we do have a generous amount that we could set aside, and most nursing homes promote having these arrangements in place. It's a good feeling to know that there's something planned when this day comes, because it's not if this day comes, it's when this day comes. We can set everything up irrevocably. Many of you may not know what that word means, but basically it means that that money is set aside and earmarked for the funeral. It cannot be counted as an asset or taken. Once the money is set aside for the funeral, it's earmarked for that. We as funeral directors can't touch it ahead of time. A family member does not have access to it. But most importantly, it's not going to be taken for care for the loved one. It's not counted as an asset any longer. So it is there at the time of death when the family needs it the most. It's really a nice thing that we're able to do in a very difficult time. I know that there are often very challenging times for families when they have to make the decision to use long-term care, but we want to make that process as easy as possible.
You're right that it is a situation that's fraught with not only financial concerns. Are we going to go bankrupt because dad needs to go into a nursing home, but also the emotions of, we wish we could have done more for our father, but he kept falling, it's becoming 24-hour care. So there's a lot of emotions. But then when you add on top of it the financial worries, it's really helpful when a combination of their elder law attorney, the funeral director, maybe a financial advisor, can all play a role in saying, look, there's a path through this so that dad gets the care that he needs. Medicaid will pay for it only, of course, if his assets are brought significantly down. And the alternative to doing what you're describing, this setting aside a generous amount of money into a funeral account that he will need anyway, and that relieves that emotional burden for the family of having to plan that, is that he just writes a check to the nursing home every month until his money's gone, and then they have to come up with the funds to pay for the funeral later. So this is all working together as part of a larger plan. And so I guess county by county, there are different amounts in Pennsylvania that you can set aside. You and I are both in Cumberland County, but can you talk a little bit about how much you're allowed to set aside and that doesn't get touched by anybody and it's just taken care of?
And Patrick, you're absolutely right. County by county, it's a different number. Here in Cumberland County, if there are extraordinary circumstances, such as maybe you're originally from California and you would like to have the body taken from Pennsylvania out to California, so there's added expenses. That limit is just under $20,000. So it gives us plenty of funds to do all the services that we need to do here in Pennsylvania, and the funds to get the body to the other state and burial in that other state. Sometimes we do need to watch our expenses, especially if we're going into a cemetery and there's no monument there. But we are able to look at all those details when we meet and put this together. If you're going to stay local and there are no extraordinary circumstances, that limit is around $16,000, which is quite generous and does provide for plenty of money to have the services, no matter what those services look like. We try to work within that number, and that certainly is a number that's workable for funeral directors. From county to county, those numbers are different. So I like to remind people of that, because if you're living in a county other than Cumberland, those numbers that I quoted will look a little bit different.
And, sometimes I'll work with families that, let's just say hypothetically, they have $100,000. Medicaid says you're allowed to have something far, far less than that. So when I tell them about this funeral pre-planning, it's one of the first suggestions I make. They might say, well, can I buy an $80,000 funeral because that'll get, dad eligible for Medicaid? The answer is no. And that's what you're talking about, is Medicaid says, well, hold on a second. We recognize this is something everybody needs. You can set that money aside and we won't count that against you. But there are caps depending on where you live.
Exactly.
So one of the other legal and financial aspects of planning ahead is what we have 22,000 veterans in Cumberland County alone. In the surrounding counties, of course, there are many, many other veterans. So if any of those people are watching this conversation, what kind of opportunities are there, or what should they be thinking about when it comes to pre-planning their funeral?
I absolutely love working with veterans. There's so much available for veterans. And what I like to do is meet with the family, meet with the veteran if that's possible. I like to get a copy of their discharge. That may be a DD-214, or it may go by a different number if the veteran is an older veteran that served before Vietnam. But once I have that information and I know that the veteran is eligible for veteran death benefits, I review everything that's available to them. Every veteran is eligible for a flag. They're eligible for death certificates, free death certificates. Typically, they are eligible for the county benefit, which is $100, and also a presidential letter. But some veterans, and many veterans with an honorable discharge, are eligible to use a national cemetery. And Patrick, here where we're located, we are so lucky because we have one of the most beautiful national cemeteries in the country, being Indiantown Gap. Arlington, of course, is a beautiful cemetery, but Arlington is becoming full, and it is harder and harder to get people into Arlington. And typically there is quite a long wait to get into Arlington. So if a death occurs, we could be waiting as long as up to 6 months to place a veteran in Arlington. But just up the road, just up 81 is Indiantown Gap. And if you are a veteran and you haven't visited that cemetery, I encourage you to do so, because at that cemetery, there is no expense to the veteran. Now, I don't want you to think that the government pays for the veteran's funeral. They do not. But what they do pay for, what Indiantown Gap provides for free, is the grave space, the grave opening, the grave liner, or what some people would call the vault, the marker. And if you're being cremated, they have walls to put the urns in. They have burial for cremated remains, and they also have a scattering garden. And always the marker for that grave or the plaque for that grave is provided. So that could cut a funeral bill in half. I am so pleased that we have such a nice national cemetery within an hour of our means, and it is quite a benefit to our veterans. So I particularly like working with veterans to accommodate this request. And by the way, Patrick, wives are also eligible. If the veteran is eligible, I shouldn't say wives, I should say spouses, because oftentimes the veteran is the wife in the couple. So if the veteran is eligible to go to Indiantown Gap or a national cemetery, the spouse is as well.
Also, I mean, it's so important, especially in this day and age. Our country has been involved in conflicts for a couple decades, and we're all looking for ways to recognize the service of veterans. And so I'm so glad that you can get the message out about this. You know, I think a lot of veterans just don't know about what's available to them. So this is really important for them to know that this is some maybe small way, but financially this could make a big difference to the family to have this kind of support for the veteran. So you've gone through logistically what pre-planning looks like, some of the information that you gather and why you would gather it. And we've talked about another reason why you want to do this is for either Medicaid for long-term care, to take advantage of veterans benefits. But what else should we know about that irrevocable account? People would set money aside in an account. So for example, do they have to figure out every detail about what the funeral would look like, pick out the casket or the urn? I mean, what level of detail goes into that aspect of pre-planning?
Quite honestly, Patrick, it is different for every family. Some people are in a rush. They're from out of state. They're coming into the area. They have a parent that they've just got settled into long-term care, and they come in and they say, Jill, I just need to get these funds set aside. I do not have the time or the energy to go through all the process of picking these things. I still need the statistical information. I still need the social security number, the date of birth, those sorts of details. But we can worry about selecting the funeral details at a later date if it's not possible or the family's not ready to do that. That's absolutely a possibility. But most families do want to take the time to sit down and say, let's get everything wrapped up. I'm coming into the funeral home. Nobody has died. Nobody's upset. We're thinking clearly. Let's get everything together. Let's get it organized. And then we know that our roadmap is in place at the funeral home. When something does occur, we have 100% faith that the funeral home understands what we want. And I think that piece to it is what gives most people the peace of mind they are after when they make a funeral arrangement. But certainly, sometimes families have a lot on their plate at one time, and it is just not possible for them to put that amount of time or energy into selecting all the funeral details, and that's okay too.
Very well said. So there's a range of options. There's some flexibility, but of course the goal is ultimately not only the legal and financial aspects of setting the money aside, for the funeral, but also achieving that peace of mind of knowing there's a plan. And that's exactly what I go for when it's purely estate planning ahead for legal and financial reasons. It's achieving a sense of peace that, you know, something could happen to you before you expect it to, and you have a plan and your family will be taken care of. So let's talk a little bit about how you actually meet with families. So your funeral home is Hoffman Funeral Home and Crematory is located in Carlisle, Cumberland County. But how do you meet with people to do this kind of pre-planning?
Most people like to come into the funeral home. And the reason for that is we have the casket selections here and the urn selections. Our crematory is right in our building. So if people would like to take a look at or try to understand the cremation process, they like to see what's going to happen and understand what they're going to be seeing and having to do. So most people do come into the funeral home, but a good percentage of the folks that I work with are unable to get out or maybe don't want to get out for whatever reason. And I am happy to go to their home to go over all these details right in their home. I think this past year was exceptional for all of us, and so many people were afraid to go out with good reason. And what we came up with was to be able to do everything over the phone or to do everything via a Zoom platform or another media platform that allowed us to talk over the internet, whatever that family was comfortable with. While the kids were home from school, we certainly utilized their computer skills in helping parents and grandparents get onto these platforms to meet over the internet. But I'm happy to go out and I'm happy to meet over the phone, whatever works best for the family. We want to make this process as smooth and easy for everybody as physically possible.
You know, I've had at least one recent client rave about how you came out to her home and spoke to her there. This might be an exceptional case, and I'm sure most people would prefer to be at the funeral home to see it. I mean, it's a beautiful building that you have, and the facilities are what are ultimately going to be used most likely. So, but this person raved about how she has transportation difficulties. She doesn't drive. She knew she had to make these plans. And so she was building up all the logistics of how she was going to get there, get a ride from somebody, and you came out and just met with her. And I think that you have a way of putting people at ease. And so she just couldn't have been more pleased about how all of the planning went. So mission accomplished there. You provided a plan and peace of mind for that family for sure.
Thanks for saying so, Patrick. But when we look at many of the families that we work with, there's so many people that maybe just had a surgery, maybe just had knee surgery or hip surgery, and getting in and out of a car is a major event for them. So if we can alleviate those worries, it's so easy for us to do that. But thank you for mentioning.
So thank you, Jill Lazar from Hoffman Funeral Home and Crematory in Carlisle. There will be more of these conversations to come on later in life planning issues. And you can look forward to seeing this on YouTube and Facebook and so forth. Jill, I appreciate your time and your insights today.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I enjoyed talking with you.